Long ago, the people of Israel lived in Egypt. Their families grew strong and numerous. Children laughed in the streets, and homes were filled with life. But a new Pharaoh rose to power, and instead of seeing the Hebrews as people, he saw them as a threat. Fear filled his heart. Soon the Israelites were forced into slavery, working day and night under the hot Egyptian sun. Still, God had not forgotten them. Fear and jealousy can cause people to treat others unfairly. Even today, some people are judged, excluded, or mistreated because others feel threatened. But God sees every person with love and value. Pharaoh became more afraid as the Hebrews continued growing stronger, so he gave a terrible command. Every Hebrew baby boy was to be thrown into the Nile River. Fear spread across Egypt. Families hid their children quietly inside their homes. But while Pharaoh planned destruction, God was already preparing rescue. The world can sometimes feel dark and unfair, but evil never has the final word. God can still bring hope even during painful seasons. During this fearful time, a Hebrew woman named Jochebed gave birth to a son. The moment she saw him, love filled her heart. For 3 months, she hid the baby carefully. Every cry brought fear. Every sound outside the house caused panic. Yet love gave her courage. Real courage is often quiet. Sometimes courage looks like parents protecting their children, families supporting one another, or ordinary people refusing to give up hope. At last, Jochebed knew she could no longer hide her son safely, so she carefully made a basket from reeds and placed the baby inside. Early one morning, she carried him to the Nile River. With tears in her eyes, she placed the basket among the reeds. Nearby, Miriam watched from a distance. The tiny basket floated softly across the water, and heaven was watching too. Sometimes faith means trusting God when we cannot control the outcome. Faith is believing that God can carry us through situations bigger than ourselves. The Nile River was meant to bring death to Hebrew babies, but God transformed the river into a path of rescue. The basket floated gently through the reeds. Danger surrounded the child, yet God's protection surrounded him even more. Sometimes the very thing we fear most becomes part of the journey God uses to shape our future. Hard seasons do not always mean God has abandoned us. Not far away, Pharaoh's daughter came down to the river. She noticed a basket floating among the reeds. Her servants brought it to her. Inside was a crying baby boy. She immediately knew he was one of the Hebrew children. But instead of anger, her heart filled with compassion. Kindness still matters. One compassionate decision can completely change another person's life. Young Miriam stepped forward bravely. "Shall I find a Hebrew woman to care for the baby?" she asked. Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Moses' own mother was brought back to care for him once again. God was quietly working through every moment. God can work through small acts of courage. Even children can make a difference when they choose bravery and kindness. Pharaoh's daughter named the child Moses because she drew him out of the water. And Moses grew up inside Pharaoh's palace, surrounded by wealth, learning, and power. But God had a greater purpose for his life. The tiny baby rescued from the river would one day help lead God's people to freedom. Success, comfort, and popularity do not always bring true purpose. Real purpose comes from becoming the person God created us to be. The story of baby Moses reminds us that God still works quietly behind the scenes, even when life feels uncertain, even when fear surrounds us, even when the future looks unclear. God is still guiding. The river that was meant to destroy Moses became the river that carried him toward destiny. And sometimes, the difficult seasons in our own lives become the very places where God begins shaping our future. Maybe someone watching today feels afraid, forgotten, or overwhelmed by life. But God still sees hidden tears. He still hears prayers whispered in silence. And just like Moses, your story may still be the beginning of something greater than you can yet imagine. Difficult seasons do not mean your life has no purpose. God can still bring hope, direction, and meaning, even through fear, waiting, and uncertainty.